Hey guys, it's Alex Serpentine here. Today I'm going to be doing a special video all about me, all about Alex Serpentine. I'm going to go into some details about my charts in these different systems, including Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, Michael teachings, Vedic Astrology, and human design. So I'll show you a summary of that in a second. But first, I just wanted to talk a little bit about me so you guys know who I am and what I'm all about, and then you can see how this factors into my charts. So yeah, I go by Alex Serpentine. It's a new last name I'm taking on for my professional world and my music and different stuff. Um, I do a lot of different things, but the main things I'm doing are with this YouTube channel. I'm teaching people about all these different systems that I mentioned, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, Michael teachings, Vedic astrology, human. And so I really want to show people how to get to know themselves within these systems and reveal deeper layers of themselves and more of their purpose and why they're here. So it's a big part of what I really want to do is help guide people towards deeper self-knowledge and empower them to move towards their goals and what they want to do with their life. And by looking at these different systems, they can get a better understanding of what's going on in their lives so they can better deal with whatever comes. So that's one big thing I really want to do in general in my life is show people about these systems. Another big thing that I'm doing is music. So I've got a couple different projects that I'm working on currently. One of them is a instrumental rock band called Holy Tears, which is, if you know genres, it's like post-hardcore, post-rock, post-metal, a lot of post stuff, but there's no lyrics or vocals, and it's just the guitars. It's just me, uh, Greg the bassist, and Francis the drummer. Just us three. We're a three-piece, and so we do like heavier, emotional, quality, and more introspective kind of music. Um, So that's one project I have, and then I also have another project that I go by Alex Serpentine, and you can find these links on my link tree to Holy Tears and Alex Serpentine. My Alex Serpentine music is on my SoundCloud, but yeah. So this Alex Serpentine project is really about me. I'm using my voice in it, so it's vocals forward, but it has a lot of metal, hardcore, and hip hop influences. And I really explore a lot of themes regarding shadow work. So a lot of the songs I write in that are based on things that I'm going through and integrating in a shadow work kind of way. So I have two songs right now that you can check out. One is Strong Man, which is about cultivating the courage to step forward into my goals and move forward with what I want to do. And then I have the song Ultimate Scum, which is about embracing myself on all levels, um, so that I can empower myself more strongly and not be so afraid of showing myself to the world, basically. So those are the two of my main songs for that, and I'm working on more for that, but that's a work in progress. Another big part of uh, my life and my experience in this life is my experience with manic episodes. I've been diagnosed bipolar 1, so I've had very, very intense manic episodes that last like 3 months at a time. And they've been really key experiences for me in really getting to know myself on a deeper level in terms of what I'm capable of and what my energy is showing me. So I've had lots of transformative experiences dealing with these manic episodes. So that's a really big part of my life too. And I've had spiritual realizations in the middle of having these manic episodes. And now I'm starting to feel like I don't even know if calling it manic episodes is really doing it justice to what's really going on. I feel like after having these experiences, what I'm really exploring is understanding primal power and what that means for us as individuals. And I feel like the whole experience with bipolar and people being diagnosed bipolar is really all that is pointing to people who have intense primal power inside them that they're learning how to integrate into their lives in a balanced way. So I really want to speak on that a lot. And I'm actually in school right now as well. I'm taking a program at National University, a master's program in consciousness, psychology, and transformation. So that's something I'm exploring right now to get more background and more of like a spiritual kind of master's program, which is really cool. But I've been studying like depth psychology a lot recently too, and that's revealed a lot to me about my various experiences with bipolar and the manic episodes, understanding that really that energy that I experience during manic episodes are as a result of suppressed energy in my unconscious that's coming into my conscious experience to be integrated. So I'm really interested in exploring, potentially after I get my master's, going for a PhD at Pacifica in the depth psychology program with the emphasis on um, archetypes, Jungian archetypes. Um, so that's like something else I'm really interested in doing at some point. So overall, I'm I have a really strong spiritual experience and background that I want to share with the world in terms of my own realizations that I've had and experiences with my energy, my mental illness, um, and my music in general in terms of what I'm sharing in terms of my creativity. So spirituality and creativity, I'd say, are two of the biggest things that are really important to me. So, and then along with all these systems I've been studying, I want to really help people with that and their own process, and so that they can empower themselves and move forward in their lives effectively and heal themselves and empower them. So that's all about me. I'm going to get into some of my presentation now about my different systems. So I'll show you that right now. Let me get that up. Yeah, so this is all my different all the different systems showing what I am in all the different systems basically. So I'm going to go through them in this order. So first I'm going to talk about Myers-Briggs or MBTI, and in that system I'm an INFP. Then I'll talk about Enneagram. I'm a self-preservation 4 mainly, but my tri-type is 459. They'll talk about the system called Michael Teachings, which explores our progress through a series of lifetimes, and our purpose over several lives. And in that system, I'm a mature scholar in dominance, and I'll explain what that means when we get to that. And in my Vedic astrology chart, I'm a Capricorn rising, Aries moon, and Aries sun. And then in my human design, I'm a 6/2 projector with the cross of limitation. So I'll get into more detail about what each of these things mean, and I'll go one by one. So let's get into it. So first, I'm talking about my Myers-Briggs. And like I said, in that system, I'm an INFP, which basically the INFP, like that code, that 4-letter code, is it's a code that represents what your cognitive function stack is. So we all have different cognitive functions, the ways that we behave and perform, and what we use internally to interact with the world and experience ourselves internally and externally. So I'm going to get into the details of what the cognitive functions are for the INFP, but this is just a slide talking about INFP overall. This is taken from Dario Nardi's Decode Your Personality book. In that book, he calls the INFP the harmonizer clarifier. And so here's a couple things that the INFP does, or what their personality is like. They need a quest for, or core meaning in life. They tend to go with the flow. They have a talent for listening, noticing what sits behind what is said. They explore moral questions and enjoy uncovering mysteries. They relate through stories and metaphors, and they struggle with structure and getting their lives in order. So, how I can relate to this in my own experience, I do feel like I am on some kind of quest with all these different systems I've been studying, and I've also been. I forgot to mention that I'm working on a book, a fictional book series that's exploring the lessons that I've learned in my own life, and maybe some of the things that I've learned through my studies, and filtering that all into a book about uh, embracing your primal power. And I'm using like reptilians in the book as a big symbol for primal power. And so the main character finds out that he has got reptilian DNA and turns into a reptilian, which is kind of like reflecting a like a manic episode, basically tying to that kind of experience that I've had personally in my own life. So it's kind of a symbol for all that. So like I said, like I relate through stories and metaphors. That's definitely true. I can see that in terms of me developing my own story, exploring moral questions. That's a big thing too for the book that I want to write. But in general, for me, I am kind of more literal in my thinking, but maybe that helps. It's probably because I read a lot of nonfiction stuff, and so my mind is kind of oriented towards that, and not as poetic as maybe some other INFPs might be. So I'm kind of more literal in my thinking, but it kind of helps to really understand deeper concepts and stuff. I definitely go with the flow more. I notice that, and I struggle with structure. But that's been really hard for me in getting my life in order. Although I'm doing good overall, but I'm noticing that I really need a lot of space and time to explore the things that really matter to me, with enough space so I can go in any direction I want. But I'm also learning a lot about structure. So, in the process of developing structure, I'm figuring out how to get the things done that I really want to get done, and so that's a big learning edge for me, is doing that. So, and also, like I said, talent for listening, noticing what sits behind what I said. I am typically like a I do focus on listening a lot when I'm in relationships with people. So that's a cool thing to notice for INFPs. I can be quiet, but I'm also getting more comfortable with expressing myself in groups or with people in general. And that I'll talk a little bit more about that in the other systems and how that comes into play. But yeah, let's get into the next slide here. So these are the cognitive functions for the INFP. So INFPs lead with quiet crusading, which is the introverted feeling cognitive function. They listen to their feelings, convictions, and conscience to make choices that align with their identity and beliefs. So my main experience that I'm really in touch with is always, what am I feeling? What do I care about? What resonates with me? And what are my beliefs? What I really care about? Who am I is the biggest question. And I think that's why probably a lot of INFPs are attracted to like personality systems and getting to know themselves very deeply. And that's kind of the reason that brought me into all these different systems, to get to know myself better, so that's why I studied all these things so much. And so I think that really helps with the introverted feeling. And also the me making my music is a strong introverted feeling. It's really ties to that introverted feeling function really strongly. So that's what I lead with. My support function is excited brainstorming, which is extroverted intuition. So it's intuition turned outwards. And what that means is, Well, it says here, perceive, pursue, and play with life's many potential possibilities, facilitating the promising ones. So what that does is you open up to seeing many possibilities, and you kind of build a web of connections between this thing and that thing. And so your mind just like connects intuitively. This connects to this connects to this, and it kind of builds out this big web of all these things being interconnected. And so that really helps. Well, I've been noticing that by studying all these different systems, that I can really see how things connect together. It's different than introverted intuition, which would be more turning inwards towards one overall insight, synthesizing everything into one thing. But extroverted intuition does the opposite, where it goes from one thing to another thing to another thing and kind of branches out. And so it's kind of more open-ended and kind of never finds its end point. You can be in extroverted intuition forever and always building out your web of seeing possibilities and making connections. So that's my second function. My third function, it says that overall that INFPs struggle with this, but they can develop it over time. And that's cautious protecting, which is introverted sensing. With introverted sensing, you reference a massive storehouse of rich past experiences as they cultivate familiarity, comfort, and stability. So really, it's like having kind of like a memory bank that you're really in touch with. So that really helps for me to reflect on my past experiences and incorporate them into what I'm experiencing currently. And it also helps me stay in touch with a lot of information that I kind of have stored inside. So it's a different version of sensing that's introverted. It's turned inwards towards what I've experienced in the past, versus extroverted sensing would be paying attention to what's happening in the external world right now. So it's really different in that sense because it has that connection to memory really strongly. And then my aspiration function, what I aspire to, is timely building, extroverted thinking. And this is where more of the structure comes in. With this, you can utilize measurable data, tools, resources, and efficient procedures to organize and make effective decisions. So this is more of like the thinking that's extroverted. And so it's more towards systems and resources, data, and deals with all that. So that's more about how I engage with my thinking process, is more what I'm interacting with externally, as opposed to somebody who has introverted thinking would be more focused on their own internal logical process that they built from the ground up inside themselves. So I have more of a dealing with the data outside, and then I can also use that as I build a stronger use of this fourth function to help me be more goal oriented and achieve things that I want to in the outer world. So that's the fourth function that INFPs usually struggle with a lot, is kind of like this more structural building things and being more goal oriented. And that's the big things that INFPs have to learn how to get stronger with. So those are my four functions being an INFP. So I'm going to talk about the first two functions again, but I'm talking about them now from the viewpoint of there's two styles for each of the cognitive functions. All the stuff that I've been showing for this Myers-Briggs stuff is from like I said, the Decode Your Personality book by Dario Nardi. So in that book, he talks about how there's a yin style or holistic style and a yang style or analytic style. The yin is more kind of creates a space of possibility of moving around and reflecting on things. It's more inward, like it says here, receptive, diffuse, flexible, inward, and bottom up, as opposed to the yang style, which is more focused in a certain direction. So with this type of introverted feeling, FI, they call it the romantic FI. And so people with this dominant live a life deep, quiet feeling. They listen to and harmonize many voices. They pursue multiple soft quests, and they allow room for inner and outer conflicts. So there's a lot of being able to, a lot of ability to move around, but it's also more internal focused. Um, so I notice how there's a lot of different things that I'm really interested in that I'm being brought towards, and I can see how that plays into me pursuing multiple soft quests. But at the same time, what they say with these is that you can develop the other side as well. So I'm also working on my Yang style, which is kind of bringing all that more into focus into one direction. So I'm developing an overall one direction that I'm heading with all this stuff, even though I've been delving into many different things. But I feel like this Yin style is more my natural way of functioning, but I'm developing the Yang style more. So that's introverted feeling, Yin style. And the extroverted intuition in the Yin style is called catalyst. Like like the other one, it's also Yin, so it's receptive, diffuse, flexible, inward, and bottom up, like I said before. With this, they notice subtle patterns. They use humor and disguises. Because extrovert intuition uh, makes a lot of connections between different things. Which is really strong for humor because you can see things that a connection that other people might not see so easily, and it can be funny, So that's really interesting. And then they search for the highest quality potential possibilities for everyone's gain. So this is more of a explorative style of extrovert intuition, but there's a more focused version too, which is the Yang style. But like I said, I'm more Yin overall, so that's why I'm showing this. So also in the book Decode Your Personality, there's 4 subtypes that are based on their brain subtypes. So Dario Nardi looked at how the brain patterns relate to the different Myers-Briggs types. And so there's 4 different ones. There's a dominant one, there's a creative one, there's a normalizing, and there's a harmonizing. And what I identified out of those 4 was that I was more the normalizing type, which is more conventional and specialized than the other INFPs, and they call it the faithful supporter. But basically, the brain wiring for this is even overall. So it's an even brain wiring that gives a linear style and even distribution of skills. People with this subtype excel at speaking, listening, reading, linear deduction, and abstract concepts. They have a large capacity for contemplation, ruminating on facts, symbols, metaphors, stories, etc. And they come off as introverted until they open up around what they're passionate about. And so I was reading about that, and I was like, yes, this is definitely my type. It kind of sucks being the normalizing one, I guess. I was kind of hoping that I would be like maybe like the creative or dominant one, but I didn't see me resonating with that. But really, what I can see with this is it really helps to have kind of like an overall integrated brain, and I can see how my listening ability and my ability to read, understand abstract concepts, and really explain them really well through my speech and interacting with people. Also, just contemplating, I can contemplate things for a long time, different things that I read or interact with. And I definitely, in the past, have come off as introverted, and it's hard for me to like engage a lot of the time until I get the opportunity to talk about what I'm excited about, and then I blow up. Like I'm just getting so excited, and I get passionate when I'm talking to somebody about my special interests. So I can definitely see how this applies to me, and all this stuff. So yeah, that's the INFP stuff. So now I'm gonna get into my Enneagram uh, types. I'm going to talk about the self-preservation 4 type first, and then I'll talk about my 459 tri-type. So overall, my main type is 4. I resonate with the 5 and the 9, which is what I'm going to talk about in the tri-type. But the 4 overall has a feeling that they're different from everybody else and they just don't fit in. They kind of feel special to themselves, but they're kind of envious of everybody else because it seems like everybody else has an easier time. So when I was younger, I was really feeling the 4 energy really, really strongly. That feeling of aloneness and isolation and feeling different than everybody else, and that's really common for feeling. But really in touch with their own emotions, and they're usually in touch with kind of the darker side of things, more of the melancholy energy overall. They really gravitate towards the melancholy feeling, and they kind of hold on to that really strongly. So for a while, I was really focused on my melancholy feelings, and through my music, I would create melancholy music, and I was just reinforce this feeling of being kind of sad, I guess, but that felt good to me. So like all the music I would listen to is all this dark, brooding kind of music, and I had a harder time opening up to something that was more positive and happy and that kind of thing. So, over time, I was able to heal a lot of the 4 feelings of like the envy overall pattern and the feeling different. And now I feel like just like everybody else. I don't feel like so different and isolated. I feel good. So I was able to work through a lot of that. But I do identify the 4 as being my main type. And so I'll talk a little bit about what I have here, which is the self-preservation subtype of the 4. Um, they call this tenacity, and they strive to experience their depth through lifestyle, creativity, and self-expression. They're very creative. They can spend hours absorbed in crafts like painting, music making, and design. They require periodic bouts of solitude to be immersed in their creative projects. They're sensitive to aesthetics and ambience, and they want their environment to be emotionally resonant. They desire home, work, and overall lifestyle to be congruent with their subjective experiences. So the self-preservation instinctual type, there's 3 of them. There's self-preservation, sexual, and social. So self-preservation overall is the most introverted of them, and they more deal with getting your physical needs met, and so the environment that you live in is really important. So I spend a lot of time at home with just getting into my own interest, things that interest me, such as making music or designing things or reading stuff, and building like these videos that I make. So I have a lot of this creative time that I need for myself. I need a lot of time to myself to explore my creative projects and my own inner world that I'm exploring. So creativity and self-expression are really important to me, but I do need a lot of alone time to really cultivate all that. I do resonate with the wanting an environment that fits my aesthetics and it resonates with my emotions. That does make a lot of sense. And I work from home from my main job. I work for a national university currently. Um, so kind of my home environment is my work environment too. So I really have like this desk that I'm working at is kind of a hub for where I do a lot of my work. So yeah, that's the self-preservation 4. It has more of a focus on this internal solitude, uh, immersed in your creative projects in your own time. And so that's what that is. And now let's get into the tri-type. So there's a theory developed by Catherine Faber that talks about the tri-types. So basically, we have a dominant type in each of the triads. So there's the body triad that has type 8, 9, and 1. There's the feeling triad or heart triad, which is the 2, 3, and 4. And then there's the 5, 6, 7, which is the thinking or head triad. So in the body triad, I'm a 9. In the feeling triad, I'm a 4. And in the thinking triad, I'm a 5. And so I spent some time, I was in some workshops about the Enneagram. And the teacher I was learning from at the time was trying to pinpoint which one I was, and we kept on bouncing between these three, and I couldn't like decide which one of these three I actually was, because I could resonate with all three of them really strongly. So it was really hard to like, I couldn't just focus on just being a 4. It just didn't make sense. I could resonate with the 5, I could resonate with the 9. So it really, for me, seeing that made it clear to me that the tri-type theory is really real. And once you understand it, you can start to apply it to people you know, and say, once you know like each of those types and each of the triads, you can say, oh, okay, this person's definitely more 8 than 1. So we'll say 8 for the body triad. They're more 3 than 4, so they're 3, and so on and so forth. But yeah, let's just talk about what the 459 is. Excuse me, my throat's a little scratchy. So it's the contemplative. So the 459 is the most withdrawn type. It's in each triad. That's the type in each one that's turned inwards and moves away from people into the inner world. So it makes them the contemplative when you put these three together. They're intuitive, which is the 4 influence. Knowledgeable, that's the 5. And accepting, that's 9. They want to be original, that's a strong 4 thing. Wise, that's 5. And peaceful, that's 9. So they're highly self-aware, reflective, shy, reserved, and self-conscious. They need regular quiet time to reflect on their thoughts and emotions, and they delve deeply into the mysteries of life and share insights with others. Overall, they need to learn to engage with others instead of always pulling away into their own private world. So, like, a really important part of this is like, I can't just stay in my own world all the time. Like, I need to reach out to people. And that's why I'm, creating all this content on my YouTube. Is I have all the stuff I've been studying and I want to share it with everybody. So, I need to actually connect outwards to other people and interact with people, so people get to know like what's been going on with me and what I've been studying on, what I've been reflecting on, what I've been contemplating, all that. And so I definitely felt a lot of shyness when I was younger. I don't feel it so much now, but I definitely still need that time, quiet time to myself, to feel fulfilled, to really process everything that's going on internally. But now I don't really have the shyness so much. And that's kind of more of a recent thing that I've overcome. And we'll talk about that with my arrogance obstacle and Michael teachings too, that relates to that as well. So yeah, the big lesson is I got to connect with people. But my inner world is very, rich and deep, because I'm exploring that all the time. So, that's what's allowed me to really study all these different systems and develop my music and do all those things. So yeah, that's the Enneagram tri-type. So that's it for the Myers-Briggs and Enneagram. Now I'm going to talk about my Michael teachings chart. So Michael teachings is this awesome system that it's all channeled. So the information was originally channeled, and it's all the knowledge from the system comes from a being that's on higher planes. It's a collective being of 1,000 souls that are working together, that are teaching us this information about how we form our lives and our lifetimes, across our whole reincarnational cycle. So, in the system, they talk about our like soul types, and that we maintain for the whole cycle, and then we progress through these different stages called the soul ages. And in each life that we have, we take on different overleaves, which are different qualities that we take on for different lessons for each life that we set up. So it's a really interesting system if you don't know about it already. But yeah, I'm going to get into the details of my chart, so you guys can understand a little bit more about me. So my role overall is scholar. That's my soul type. and the scholars are the ones that study and seek knowledge. So they want to like digest information and knowledge as much as like they just like crave it so much. Like when they have an interest in something, they want to just delve deeply into it. If it's through reading something, reading a certain subject, or exploring things more with their bodies, like maybe a certain hobby or interest that they have out in the world, actually being hands-on with something so they can really understand something. Because their purpose overall for out of the 7 roles is to be the one that has the resource and the knowledge about different topics or different things that they're interested in. So that's like their main drive is to seek knowledge and to share that with other people as a resource. They can have different interests and a lot of different hobbies. That's a really common thing for scholars. So I have like my music and stuff, and my graphic design stuff I do, different things like that. But overall, the scholar allows me with the one input. There's different inputs for each of the types, which is how much where you can bring in different information from different places. But I only have one input as a scholar, which means I can laser focus on a certain thing at a time, which allows me to like read a book and just like really get into it without being distracted or whatever I'm focused on. So yeah, that's what the scholar is all about. My essence twin, which is the soul that I bond with for my inner lessons. Everybody has a soul twin, essence twin, except for the few people who choose not to have one for their cycle. Most people do have one, and mine's a sage. They're male, and I have no plans to meet them, so they're in their own life right now. They could be discarnate, and with certain people on certain people's charts, they'll be discarnate, but sometimes they're incarnate. So what that means for me is I don't have as much sage energy as I would if they were discarnate, because when they're discarnate, their energy kind of rides your shoulders and you kind of get a boost of that energy overall. So the sage energy is all about communication and communicating insight and wisdom, but they also have a humorous element to them, which is part of their communication and their flair and their personality. So they have kind of strong personalities in terms of how they express themselves. So a lot of them become like actors, or they might be attracted to theater, or they like performing as a musician, or different things like that. They love to be on stage. They love to be in front of people, communicating with people and communicating insight or funny things, being a comedian, different things like that. But for me, what that really signifies that I chose a sage essence twin is that I wanted to help my own seeking of knowledge as a scholar and supplement that with kind of a flair for communication, and communicating insight and wisdom overall. But also gives me kind of connection to expression overall, which can be through the arts in different ways and performing. So that's really interesting to see. And so let's get into some of the other stuff here. Cadence position, cadence and creator cadence deal with where you're placed in your entity. And an entity is a group of 1,000 souls. That's your soul family. So each of those are just basically different parts that are signifying different aspects of like where you're placed in the soul family, and you take on characteristics of wherever you're placed. So I've got scholar cadence position. So that kind of reinforces more of the scholar energy. It's just like doubled up. So I'm even more scholar-like than other scholars would be, because I have that. And then my cadence is artisan. So I have some extra qualities there, that brings in more creativity overall. So that the artisan is really sensitive overall. It's the most sensitive type. They're very creative. They're like working with their hands. And that really kind of shows me like why I might be more attracted to like graphic design, for example, and music. Having more of a creative flair to me is because I have this artisan going on. My major in college was design media arts. So I was attracted to graphic design. And I've been interested in music since I was, like a teenager. Since I was like 13, I've been playing music. So that's really present there. The warrior is not going to be as strong, being a greater cadence position thing. So I don't have too much warrior energy going on. But overall, what you can see for those is that I have the 2 expression axis types as secondary influences with the sage and artisan. So that makes me more creative. My task companion, which is another soul that I work with, is also a scholar. So they help with my external tasks in life. And they're discarnate, so they're helping me on the higher planes, on the astral plane, and helping me with all the tasks that I do. And because they're scholar, that helps with the more seeking, studying kind of energy. So I got a lot of scholar stuff going on overall. So that's a lot of the stuff in my essence. Here's some more stuff in the essence. Like I was going to say, actually, it's the essence over here on the left is the stuff that stays the same for my whole reincarnational cycle. So all this stuff is going to stay the same in all my lives on Earth. And I'll get into the overleaves, which are more just the stuff for this life. So now I'm going to talk about my cadre and entity. A cadre is a group of 7 entities, and an entity is a group of 1,000 souls. So they're kind of like my soul family. So this comes from Shepherd Hoodwin. This chart was all channeled by Shepherd Hoodwin, and he has a certain numbering system for the cadres. But I'm in 4-7, cadre 4, entity 7. And so this is actually a king-oriented entity. So this group of 1,000 souls has more of the king energy influence, which is a lot about leadership. So there might be in my entity a lot of people who have more of this leadership kind of energy overall in how they behave and perform in the world. And so some of the people that are actually in my entity are like Kanye West, Thomas Jefferson, XXX Tentacion, and Alan Moore, and a lot of other people too. But those are some of the ones that I've actually made some videos about that you can go check out. But yeah, they're all in my soul family. So my orientation is energy. It's also called beauty. It's more of the in terms of the 3 different orientations you can have. There's love, truth, and energy. So each of those are the highest manifestation of the different kind of centering overall of the dimensions that you can experience things. So, like truth is all about the intellect, the highest manifestation of intellect. Love is about the emotional dimension of things. And energy is like the body, energy, action-oriented aspect of things. So what that signifies as it being in my essence is that I'm more attracted to the energetic domain of things, what I feel in my body, the energy that's actually present there. And it could signify that in a lot of my lives, I'm oriented towards action and moving my body and dealing with energy and cultivating energy in my body. And this is really interesting because when I reflect on my experiences with my bipolar manic episodes, I think I've cultivated a lot of energy, primal energy that I have as part of my soul that tries to get integrated into my current life, but that I've cultivated so much that I've had to learn how to unblock my solar plexus so that I can really allow this energy to flow through me. And I think that this happens a lot with people that have energy orientation or souls that are like the roles like warrior or king, which are the more action oriented, energy focused roles overall. So I'm noticing that like kings like Kanye West and even Trump have kind of this strong primal energy aspect. And so I think this is an aspect that I'm dealing with a lot, which is due to my energy orientation and my interest in energy overall. So that's really interesting to look at. My male-female energy ratio is 41-59. So it's 41% male, 59% female. So I'm more on the female energy side. And what that really means is I'm more focused on the being dimension of things, more of a creating an environment of kind of energy and things that I'm filtering through and experiencing. It's not as directed in one direction as it would be if I was male energy dominant. So people with male energy dominant are more single point focused, going through towards goals, and they're more business oriented in general. While the people that have female energy dominant, like me, are more creative overall, and they tend to be more kind of have a spiritual edge to them, more focused on the being aspect of things. So that's interesting to look at. My frequency is 47, which is about in the middle. 50 is the middle, 100 is the top. So that means that my energy is more fluid. I'm not super solid in my energy, but I'm not super airy either. So I'm kind of in the middle road of those things. It's very normal, very kind of the average frequency that people would have. My previous cycles is 10, which means that in past lives, in past cycles, I've had 10 cycles before this cycle on Earth. So I lived on 10 different planets as different reasoning beings, like uh, beings like us, like our types of souls are more of the reasoning, have more of the reasoning faculty experience. And this is the type of souls that we are the ones that take on these roles. So I've actually been 10 different roles. I've had different overleaves and essence types for over these previous cycles on these different planets. So in this cycle on Earth, I'm a scholar, but in a previous cycle, I could have been on a different planet as like a king or as an artisan or something. So it's really interesting to look at. Some of the previous cycles of other people, like Jesus actually had 19 previous cycles, so he was like really advanced. He had a lot of experience on other planets before he came to Earth. um Hitler had 7, which isn't a ton of previous cycles, but the average on the planet is 4. So he was further along in terms of his experience than a lot of people on the planet. But I find that people's charts that I have and from friends and family and celebrities and stuff are usually around 10. I usually see 10 as the number, 10 or 11. But I've seen a lot that are like 13, 14, some 16, 17, but those are more rare. So that's kind of a little information on that. So also in Michael teachings, they have something called the raw number, which is a number that shows you where you are in terms of your entity and and it determines what your global job and community responsibility are, which are things we take on that we focus on. So like the global job is kind of like the overall job that you choose for all your lives on Earth. And my global job is salvage or salvation, which is a double priest one. So it's the most priest global job that you can choose from. And so what that is basically, they call it like spiritual counseling, but it's also like it's generally a feeling of wanting to save the planet or save people in general and bring them more towards their spiritual fulfillment, their spiritual evolution and growth. And so that's kind of, for me, makes me want to to play that role for people where I can help them bring people from a stuck place into finding their spiritual essence, getting in touch with their essence and who they really are, and enabling them to live their lives effectively in touch with who they are and healing themselves and waking up, raising their awareness and consciousness. So that's kind of what I'm really interested in doing. But the salvage, I can see also as really an interest in saving the planet however I can. But I want to do this through interacting with people and helping people find themselves so they can live their lives according to their deepest calling. So my community responsibility is equality. So really, when I'm interacting with my community, I'm always seeing things through the lens of equality, which means I see everybody as equal in their value. So I can see that everybody has value in who they are. Everybody's unique and has their own unique contribution to the world and role in the world. And I really recognize that, and I really feel strongly that everybody has something important to offer, no matter where they're at or in their process and whatever they've experienced in their past or whoever they are. they're all equally valuable. So that's kind of what's emphasized for me. So I also have the truth orientation from that raw number. So for my global job and community responsibility, I'm more focused on the truth aspect, the intellectual plane of things for that. So yeah, that's some stuff from the raw number, global job and community responsibility. And that's all the stuff in my essence. So that's all the stuff that stays the same for my whole reincarnational cycle. And now I'm going to talk about my overleaves, which is the stuff that I chose for this life only. First, I'm talking about my soul age. So the soul age is what we progress through our different lives. My soul age is mature, and I'm level 3. So the mature soul age is after the young soul age, and the young soul age is all about achievement and more of an external focus in the world, trying to achieve as much as you can and be as successful as you can. But after that, you turn inwards and focus on more internal lessons, such as your connection to yourself and who you really are on a deep level, connection to your emotions and knowing yourself emotionally, and also nurturing relationships and exploring the whole relationship dynamic and how we're related to everybody else, and how we feel connected to everybody else. So those are the big lessons I'm learning in this life, and this part of my cycle is really exploring the emotional and spiritual dimensions of things, going really deep into that and experiencing it intensely. It's a really intense period. It's actually the hardest soul age to be in out of all 5 of the ones that we go through during our reincarnational cycle. Following the mature soul age is the old soul age, where you become more detached, become more of a teacher, and you reflect on your experiences through your whole reincarnational cycle. But I'm not there yet. I'm in the middle of the mature soul age, level 3. And level 3, it's level 3 of 7. So I'm what that means is I'm all in on the mature soul age lessons at this point, but I'm still trying to integrate them in a way that I can be more confidently expressing that perspective outwardly in the world. So it's more of an introverted time for me in level 3. And I can really see that in terms of how a lot of this introverted energy from all these different systems that you can see. So yeah, now let's get on to my goal, which is dominance. So dominance is the action-oriented goal that aligns with the king. So it's the king. And kings are all about being the ruler, basically. Like the dominance energy is really strong for kings. They want to be at the top, leading everybody else. And so the lessons I'm learning about in this life is about dominance, which is leadership, being the authority in my fields, or what I have to offer, and showing people the way into whatever I have to teach or show to the world. And being a scholar, it's going to be more in terms of maybe like information or knowledge, and also having the artisan and sage influence is more of the creativity aspect, which can come into my music. So what this really signifies for me is that I'm stepping into leadership roles in terms of what I'm doing. And so I can see that in my band with Holy Tears, me leading the band in terms of providing all the music, and leading with that. So what I'm doing with these systems and my channel and my teaching overall that I want to bring to the world is a representation of me stepping into this dominance goal. So that's so I'm like, being aware of that is really interesting, because at first when I saw my chart for the first time, I was like, what, dominance? What? I don't want to be dominant. Like, that sounds scary, So it's just like, it took me a while to warm up to it, but like now I'm starting to feel like, oh, dominance is kind of cool. Like it's pretty cool to be able to be the forerunner in a new field or whatever it is I do, kind of leading the way for everybody. So that's actually a really exciting thing to see that's in my chart. So I'm really excited about being in dominance, but it was scaring me at first. But yeah, if you have dominance in your chart, just know that you're supposed to be a leader in this life with whatever you do, whatever you choose to do. So my attitude for this life is stoic, which is with this, it's the server's natural attitude. And that's because it's more focused on the inner world. And so what that really does is that it it doesn't it's not so phased by what's happening in the external world. It's kind of like it's stoic about it. It's not really affected by what's happening externally. Like things can be happening, and basically my internal state and who I am and how I feel is basically unaffected by it, and I can just stay serene despite whatever is happening. So it's more focused on what's happening internally. My inner world is more of interest to me, and than whatever's happening out in the outer sense. So it's really interesting to have that with dominance, because I'm focused on my inner world, and everything I'm exploring is based on what I'm exploring in my inner world. So that's really interesting to see. My mode is caution. So how I'm going about dominance is through a cautious kind of approach. And usually people who have caution mode get it because in past lives they might have been more reckless or not as careful, and so they might have made a lot of mistakes or hurt people that potentially created bad karma. Um, and so in this life, they're learning how to be more cautious and really think through things before they take action. So my energy overall when I do things is I kind of have to I have to feel through things to make sure I can really step into things confidently and appropriately. So that's kind of an influence that I have. It's kind of a weird thing too to have for dominance, to be cautiously dominant, but it's interesting. So my centering is physical moving. So what that means is the centering could be either intellectual, emotional, physical, or moving. And so I have the two action oriented centerings. So physical means that I'm in touch with what my body feels like, the energy in my body, what's happening internally in a kinesthetic kind of way. I'm really in touch with how my body feels, the energy in my body, what my especially what my gut feelings tell me. I'm really in touch with what my gut says to me about whatever I'm feeling. So it's kind of tied to my intuition on a body level. Um, but yeah, it has more of an orientation towards feeling the aliveness in the body. And then the moving part is taking that energy and moving into action. So it's the energy aspect in movement, in motion, in action. So I go from feeling what I'm feeling into moving into action. So that's basically what my centering is all about. So now we'll talk about my obstacles. So I have arrogance and self-destruction. So the obstacles are the fear patterns that we all take on for each life. They're kind of like stumbling blocks that we have to overcome, and by focusing on them, we can overcome them if we become more aware of them, and we can work with them so that they're not limiting us in the ways that they would if we didn't really deal with them. So my main one is arrogance, and this really ties to everything I've been saying in terms of kind of the introversion and shyness, because arrogance is basically a fear of being judged or of feeling vulnerable. So there's kind of like a fear that if I put myself out there, like I'm going to be judged, or potentially it feels like you're going to be killed. And maybe it could. I've heard that this kind of stems from past lives where I was killed for being outspoken in a certain way, and maybe because of that, I have a fear of being exposed in the world because maybe I could get killed again. That's what it feels like, which is pretty intense. But I've learned how to overcome that feeling. And one time I was meditating and I had this feeling of embracing the ultimate scum. And that's kind of the source of that song I was talking about, Ultimate Scum. That's in my Alex Serpentine SoundCloud that you can check out. But really, what that's about is like really accepting myself on all levels so that I'm not ashamed of who I am. So, so really, that really helps to overcome the arrogance, because I can be vulnerable. I can be exposed to the world. I can be judged and not feel, you know, debilitated by that in any way. So really, working with the arrogance has helped me a lot. I actually needed to overcome arrogance to even like do stuff like make my music or make these videos and share them with people. Because if I was still run by my arrogance, I would be too shy to even put myself out there. So it really helped to work with that so I can put myself out there more and connect with other people. My second obstacle is self-destruction, which is about basically feeling that you're not in control and struggling with control. So there's a couple different patterns that people take on with this. They might be like too controlling and be like too structured over themselves and trying to stay in control. So they might be too rigid and like maybe be like over disciplined, And so that's actually can be a problem because that usually results in falling out of control and kind of getting into self-destructive patterns. It's like self-sabotage because you're trying to be in control and then you just like, I don't have control, and then people will get like become addicted to become alcoholics or get addicted to some kind of drug that's really destructive for themselves. um but I felt overall how I relate to the self-destruction is sometimes I feel like I'm not actually in control of my life and I can't make the changes in my life and move in the direction that I want. And so what I've learned with that is that how to overcome this is to realize that I can take little steps forward. I know I can. There's things that I can do that are actionable and within my ability to accomplish. And by leaning on that and stepping into that, I can actually achieve what I set out to achieve, and I can orient my life in a way where I actually do have control over what I'm doing, and it builds the confidence in myself to actually have control over the direction of my life and what how I'm behaving. But the thing is, you don't want to overdo the structure and the discipline because then it'll break at some point, and then you'll fall out of control and you'll get into bad habits and self-sabotaging behavior. So I've been learning a lot about that too, and I've been developing more of a sense that I do have control over my life, and that I'm able to make the right move actions in my life to get where I want to go with my life. So that's good. So it's really helpful, like, to look at these obstacles and understand them and learn to overcome them because they're really limiting if they're really affecting you. So I find that's one of the most important things about the Michael teachings is to be aware of these obstacles. And I have videos on these that you can check out. The obstacles or dragons on my channel, so you can read about those. So now let's talk about my body types. I'm Saturnian and Lunar, which are the two inspiration types. Saturnian is more of a leadership oriented energy. And then Lunar is more of this internal self-reflective kind of energy. So they're kind of opposites, but they're attracted to each other naturally. But I have both of them inside me as part of my body and how my body's functioning, like the energy of my body. So it's this leadership energy paired with this reflective internal, like kind of like the moon kind of energy, very um, reflective, inner focus on the mind. It could be, they often explain Lunar as kind of genius, which is interesting. So I'm exploring that and seeing how that relates to me. But Saturnian is the leadership one, and that's my main one. So the last pieces on here are the quadrant, which is like what role you take in a group setting. I'm the knowledge one, so I'm the one who provides like information or knowledge about something in a group setting. And then my needs are expansion, expression, and exchange. Expansion is about always growing in a certain area. It could be growing in knowledge or building, like, for example, building my YouTube channel and adding more and more to it and expanding. It could be growing in wealth. It could be growing in whatever way I can. And if I nurture that, I can continually expand my body of work or whatever I'm doing. And so that's my main need. Expression is my second one. So really expressing myself and my creativity is going to be really important for me, and that manifests through my music that I make and through speaking in general about things that I'm attracted to. And exchange is more of this one-on-one kind of back and forth energy that I have with people, where I'm really connecting one-on-one. And so I really need those one-on-one connections to feel fulfilled in my life. So I need to nurture those, so I can share myself with people one on one. So yeah, that's everything in my Michael chart. I have a Michael Teachings Resources document that I made. You can check on my channel. I have a Michael Teachings Resources video that goes into all the different stuff about Michael Teachings. I made a series of videos about this stuff. So if you don't know about it, you can check out my channel and learn more about yourself through it. If you don't have a chart already, which you can get from Shepherd Hoodwin at shepherdhoodwin.com, he channels charts for $111 currently. You can get your whole chart that looks like this from him. But I also have 4 tests that I made. One's for the role, one's the soul age, one's the goal, and one is the obstacle. So you can take all 4 of those tests to figure out the main important things from Michael Teachings that you need to pay attention to if you want to find out some of your stuff for free. And so you can do that on my link tree, which I'll put in my discussion in my description of this video. And so you can check that out to figure out your own stuff for this. But I would definitely recommend getting a chart channeled from Shepherd Hoodwin if you want to get a whole chart like I have here. So overall, what I can say about me in terms of what this chart says is that I'm a scholar overall. So I got this studying, knowledge, focus aspect of myself. I got the creative element with the sage and artisan. So the expression is really big, especially with the expression need. So a lot of the creative element tied with my scholar energy is really focused on both being a teacher in terms of providing education and knowledge, but also communicating that in a creative way, and also exploring the arts is really big for me. I have the energy orientation, and my physical moving centering, which is more of this energetic aspect of things that I'm really big on exploring. And I think that really ties into my experience with manic episodes and all the energy that I experience in those. And that's really dominant in my experience. And I'm really aware of my body and the energy. So that's a really big part of it. My dominance goal makes me a leader, especially with having this Saturnian body type to support that in the leadership. So a big theme for me in this life. And I got the Stoic and caution. So I'm focused more on the internal world, and I'm cautious about how I go about things. And I'm in the mature soul age, so my lessons overall are about emotions, my deeper sense of myself, and being in touch with myself and the spiritual domain of things, and connecting to other people and nurturing the relationships that I have. So yeah, and then I have the salvage salvation global job. So I'm spiritual counseling is probably something overall that I resonate with really strongly, and so I really want to help people in that way to heal them and move them onto the correct spiritual path for them in terms of their own evolution, and that's a big drive for me. So yeah, lots of really important information in here that I learned by studying the system. So it's a really important system, I would say, out of all different systems to check out. But yeah, so that's my Michael chart. Now I'm going to get into my Vedic Astrology chart, including not just the birth chart, but my Navamsha, and maybe I'll look at the Shamsha a little bit too, which is a 2 other divisional charts that have some more information. I've been looking at my Vedic Astrology chart for quite a while now. I first found out about it like 10 or 11 years ago now. And I'd never resonated with my Western chart so much. It just something didn't feel right about it. But once I discovered my Vedic chart, I was like, wow, this is like, there's so much here, and it goes so deep. And so I've been studying a lot about Vedic astrology for a while now, and got some training under Kamala Sutton, who's a Vedic astrologer. So I know a good amount about the system now, and I've been making videos about it, about celebrities and stuff. But yeah, I would say, if you're getting into astrology, I would say go Vedic, because it's just such a more developed system. It's much more advanced than Western astrology is. You can include the outer planets, which is the main thing that I would say Western astrology provides that Vedic astrology doesn't traditionally provide. But I use this app called Cosmic Insights, and it allows you to add the outer planets on there. And so the outer planets I've been studying too more recently, and they do really highlight some interesting things, especially when there's aspects to key planets like I have in my chart with Pluto here, and then my Rahu, which is conjunct Uranus Neptune. But I'll get into that in a second. But yeah, so Vedic astrology is super awesome. It's a little different than Western astrology in terms of how the chart is made, and the calculation is different for the zodiac. I wouldn't trust the Western calculation because it's no longer aligned with the constellations as it was when it was first made. It's actually an inaccurate calculation now. So it really distorts what you're getting information wise in the chart. It's like a distorted chart. So I wouldn't trust it. But you can do whatever you want, you know. Everybody has their own process and you can figure out how you relate to it or what you want to do with it. But I really found that Vedic astrology is the hidden gem. So anyway, I'll get into the details of my chart now. So overall, I'm a Capricorn rising. So in Vedic astrology, they look at your rising sign as your main sign. So if they ask like what my sign is, I would say Capricorn because that's my rising sign. And then what they look at secondarily from there is the moon, which for me is Aries, and then the sun, which is Aries also for me. But they also look at the moon in terms of the nakshatra, which is really a big thing, which I'll talk about in a second too. And my moon nakshatra is Bharani. But yeah, let's look through this chart. I'll jump around to different things that I see and address everything that's here. So one of the big things that's here on my chart is that I have Saturn in Capricorn in the ascendant and because my rising sign is Capricorn, that makes the Saturn in the first house. So I actually have a strong Saturn because it's in Capricorn, but it's in the ascendant. And so when you have Saturn in the first house, that usually indicates that this life is really a big leadership life, and it's really about building a legacy. That's what Capricorn in general as a rising sign is all about, building a legacy. So if you have Saturn in the first house, you know, you'll probably feel the pressure of Saturn kind of like weighing you down. Like you feel like you've got like a big responsibility and that weighs you down, and you feel like kind of overwhelmed by that. Like that you have I've got like a big role to play. It feels like, and it feels overwhelming and scary. And that's kind of what the Saturn energy reinforces. And so it actually, when it's in the first house, it makes it hard for self-assertion and self-expression. It makes it really hard to do that. And when I was younger, that was definitely something that was difficult for me. And as I got older, now that I'm 33, I've been through my Saturn return. So it's been through all the houses and different areas of my life in the transit. And so now I actually have a lot more freedom from that heaviness of that energy, and I know how to deal with it now. So I'm able to deal with it better. But really, it's all about what Saturn represents for me is developing discipline and structure so that I can move towards my goal and my legacy that I'm building. And so that's a long process that goes over my whole life. But basically, I'm a Saturnian type. You know, I'm a Saturn-led person. So Saturn is really big. I'm actually going to talk about the Virenchi Yoga, which is something that I have in my chart. So I'll talk about the different aspects of that. So part of that is having Saturn in Capricorn in the first house. The first house is a Kendra. It's one of the cardinal houses, so it's strong. But with Virenchi Yoga is a special yoga that happens when Saturn is in its own sign or exaltation sign in a Kendra, along with Jupiter being in its own sign or exaltation sign in a Kendra or Trikona, which is the 5th or 9th house, as well as the 5th house Lord, which is Venus in my case, in its own sign or exaltation sign. So I have all that. I have Saturn and Capricorn in the first house. I have Jupiter in Cancer exalted in the 7th house, which is a Kendra. And then I have Venus, which is my 5th house Lord, in Taurus in the 5th house. So that gives me Virenchi Yoga, which is actually a really strong yoga. It represents Brahma, the creator archetypally. But it deals with being able to have wisdom, intelligence, and creativity, all those things to be able to provide, and is a strong indicator for kind of like a advanced, role to play, with all that capability there. So it's pretty cool to see that I have that in the chart. It's actually a very rare thing to have. But I learned about that in the process of taking Kamala Sutton's classes, learning about the yogas. So that's a really interesting one to look at. So let's see what else is in here. Let's do Sun and Moon in Aries. So my Sun is actually in Aries at 2 degrees, and that the nakshatra Ashwini, which is the symbol is the horses, like 2 horses, and they're kind of this driving. It's like that Aries energy that's driving forward through things. It has this speed to it. It has energy behind it, and it has this like healing ability. So it's actually, Sun is exalted in Aries, especially in Ashwini. Ashwini is one of the kind of more leadership energies out of all the nakshatras, because it's actually the first nakshatra out of all of them. So that's more of a kind of leadership energy. And something interesting that I have is my Sun is Virgotama in the Navamsha, which I'll get into in a second. But that means that it's actually still in Aries in the Navamsha, which reinforces the strength of the Sun in my chart. And it's also like that in the Dashamsha, if you look at that one, and other charts too. But it's still in Aries. And that's because of the early degree in my chart, early degree of Aries. So I have a really strong Sun. It's in Aries in pretty much all the divisional charts, including the birth chart. So I have, my Sun is really strong with that placement. I actually don't know too many people else who have that, but my aunt has Sun in Aries in early degree too, and she has the same thing. She's a Ashwini Sun, and has her Sun in Virgotama in the other charts, divisional charts, and she has the goal of dominance also in her Michael teaching. So there's something about Aries Suns having the goal of dominance is kind of like a common thing. So the Aries Sun is kind of a leadership energy overall. So my Moon is also in Aries at 24 degrees, and that's in the nakshatra Bharani. And Bharani is the symbol for that is the vagina, but it's more of this creative element, creative energy, kind of like where you're building up energy in the womb, nurturing the creative energy, and it builds up, and you're holding on to it, and then you give birth to it at some point. And so that's the process for people with Bharani, is that they have this capacity to hold on to energy, to build it up and release it in creative acts. So they're basically connected to the inner world and bringing that into the outer world, into external manifestation. They're very creative overall, and they have this tie to kind of the birth and death cycle of things. It's kind of very scorpionic in a way, you could say. Bharani is in that sense. Very kind of tied to the occult in a lot of ways. There's a lot of people, like other people I know that are Moon Bharani, are James Braha. He was a Vedic astrologer. I think Carl Jung also is Moon Bharani, and he's the depth psychologist, the famous depth psychologist. Sigmund Freud also has a lot of Bharani placements. So there's something to do with psychology as an interest for people who have a Bharani placements. But then there's also like graphic designers and stuff that have Bharani. So that's really interesting to see, and I can relate to that because I'm a graphic designer also. But I have this interest in the occult in general and stuff, so I can see how that ties to my Moon. So both my Sun and Moon are in Aries in the 4th house. So the 4th house is kind of like a very mystical house. It's one of the cardinal houses, so it's one of the main important areas. It deals with the home and family life, a little bit, and mother, connection to mother. But really overall is it deals with kind of your connection to yourself on an internal level, your private emotional world inside, and feeling connected to yourself and knowing yourself. So that's kind of the big part with the fourth house. I noticed that people who have prominent fourth house placements are tend to be very spiritual, and so it's kind of this mystical house, and one of the most powerful. It's the only water house that's a Kendra, a cardinal house. So there's something very mystical about it. But this could also indicate for me, having Sun and Aries there and Moon there, that my internal life, my private life is really big, and kind of my home life is really huge for me. And I'll be spending a lot of my time in this life in the home and in private places, and like it could be also tied to ashrams, but also because Sun is exalted in Aries in the fourth house, I could have like a special home. And so I've been feeling into that for a while, that I'm really interested in having like kind of building like this modular home like out in the forest or somewhere surrounded by nature, and having this like really special home where I can do all the things I want to do all at home and just stay home all the time. That's basically what I want to do, and then go out to the world and go, maybe go on tour or something, playing my music, or go and do talks or something. That's kind of what I'm seeing that I want to do in the future. But yeah, so I've been sensing, this kind of coming big home life and having a special home, and I have my own home right now in terms of an apartment, but and I spend a lot of time here, but I'm looking to have that special home someday, and so that's what that kind of indicates for me in my karma with the Sun and Moon in the fourth house in Aries. So let's see what else I can look at here. I actually have Pluto aspecting my moon. You can see Pluto is at 25 degrees. I'm talking about the left chart here, just so you know. The one on the left right now, that's the birth chart. So you can see my moon is at 24 degrees, and then Pluto's at 25 degrees, and they're opposite from each other. So my moon is opposite Pluto. And so what this signifies for me is kind of a really intense energy dealing with moon energy, and the moon is tied to females in general. So my experience of females, especially my mom, um, moon represents mother as well. Um, is kind of like a smothering, domineering, controlling energy with females, and so that's actually been my experience in terms of people I've dated in the past, and my experience of dealing with my mom is that she's been really uh, uh, really she wants to like take care of me, but it's been kind of an intense energy to make sure I'm okay. But then I've dealt with this kind of smothering, controlling energy in past uh, relationships with women, and it's been a hard thing to deal with. But I've been learning how to deal with it, because I used to be a lot more passive, and throughout my relationships, I've learned how to be more assertive and state my boundaries and my needs more strongly, so I'm not overcome by that energy. But overall, that kind of like having the Pluto there aspecting the moon, that's affecting my internal emotional sense of myself. So it kind of brings this intensity to it, um, and makes me more Plutonian overall, which is more in touch with kind of like the underground underlying currents of energy, and basically being in touch with the unconscious on a certain level is what happens having this aspect from Pluto on my moon. So that's really interesting to deal with, and I've been exploring that a lot. It can bring like psychic ability and different things like that. So that's really interesting. So let's see what else we can talk about here. Talked a little bit about my Jupiter. Jupiter's in Cancer in the seventh house, so my relationships are going to be. I'm going to have a lot of kind of like gurus, you could say, through my relationships. Also, the 7th house is the 10th house from the 10th house. So it kind of represents the career in a sense. So in the sense that Jupiter energy is present in my career. So that could be me being a teacher, being a spiritual teacher in a sense, but also having a lot of connections to other people in my life and my relationships that can be teachers to me. And so my relationships could have this spiritual element to them in my relationships, especially with Jupiter being exalted in Cancer. And then some other things I can look at in terms of my relationships. I have the Jupiter also rules the 12th house. So that brings more of a spiritual element to my relationships because the 12th house is very spiritual. And then Jupiter also rules the 3rd house, which is dealing with communication. So communication is really big in my relationships. It's a really important aspect of my relationships. So that's also an aspect there in terms of my relationships. Some other things I can look at here is my career. So if you're looking at the 10th house, I've got Libra there. So that ruled by Venus. So, and Venus is in my 5th house in Taurus. So it's actually in its own sign in the 5th house. The 5th house is all about creativity and it's like special talent from past lives. So if you have planets in the 5th house, usually kind of indicates some kind of past life talent. But it also deals with children and creativity in general. So my career is tied to 5th house matters, which is about creativity and the arts and expression and stuff like that. So that's a big part of my tied to the arts, to expression, to creativity in that way. It could also potentially be working with children, which is something I've been contemplating a little bit in terms of like maybe making like a children's album or something like that. So that's interesting to look at. Another thing to look at in my chart is my Mercury in Pisces at the 29th degree. So that's actually my Atma card, my soul planet. So basically, out of all the planets on my chart, I'm basically represented as Mercury and Mercury in Pisces. So it's actually the nakshatra is Revati, which is the last nakshatra. But it deals. They call that being wealthy in mind and spirit. But it's basically Pisces energy, and so this makes my mind, my intellect, very intuitive. So I'm able to see things in a very intuitive way in terms of how I intellectualize things. But this also gives me a strong musical ability with Mercury and Pisces. And what's really interesting is my band Holy Tears, the bassist and drummer also have Mercury and Pisces at like the 29th degree in Revati, just like me. And they're also Aries suns like me as well. So we have something in common there going on. And they're both very musical, obviously being musicians. And so we all have that Mercury and Pisces, Atma Karaka, 29th degree kind of placement, which is really interesting to see. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about in my birth chart is the Rahu Ketu axis, which is the north node and south node of the moon. And so the south node or K2 is all about what your past, and Rahu, north node, is all about what you're moving towards in this life and what you're craving to experience. And so I'll talk about my south node first, my K2. It's conjunct Mars in the 6th house. You can see down here on the left, bottom left. And Mars with K2 is a really strong significant because it's one of the personal planets. And Mars deals with your drive, your energy, your willpower, kind of your action-oriented energy. And it being with K2 signifies that my Mars energy, my martial talent, has been developed really strongly from past lives. That I've been engaging with Mars energy a lot in past lives. So I'm really advanced in terms of dealing with my Mars energy, my drive, my willpower, my action-oriented ability. And this could mean that I've been like a warrior or in war in past lives, and I've heard that through some psychics and shamans telling me that I've had lives as like a commander in war. So I can really resonate with that feeling. And in terms of my bipolar experiences too, this really resonates with the Mars K2. And I know somebody else who has Mars K2 that has bipolar one. One of my friends has that. Um, and so there's something about having strong primal energy, I think, is tied to this. But because it's with K2 kind of holds things back or holds things down and kind of suppresses it. So I for a long time I felt kind of disconnected from my Mars kind of energy, my self-assertion, my drive, my willpower, those kinds of things were hard to access for me. And it's also tied to my anger. So it's been hard to get angry. Um, but over time, I've been able to get more in touch with that. And really, what that signifies for me is that I'm learning how to embrace my Mars energy in a leadership kind of way in this life, using Mars in the highest sense, which is as for leadership. And it's also very strategic. Mars K2 signifies very strategic kind of mind. And so also because they're in the sixth house deals with obstacles and enemies, but also about healing. So with Mars and K2 there, I could have a talent from past lives for healing, but also overcoming obstacles. And Mars and K2 are malefics, and they're strong in the sixth house actually. So that means I can actually overcome any enemies that come my way. I can deal with whoever comes up against me. I can deal with it, which is pretty cool. Um, so that's my South Node K2 placement, and we'll talk about my Rahu now. So my Rahu is what I'm moving towards in this life and what I'm craving to experience. And it's in Sagittarius in the 12th house. And it's conjunct Uranus and Neptune. So it's a really interesting placement. Rahu in the 12th house signifies moving towards more of the internal world, isolation, doing things like meditation, being in altered states, being connected to dreams, exploring intuition, things like that in general. So it's very, very spiritual energy. And I've been moving more towards spiritual awakening, enlightenment, things like that are, um, are kind of indicated with Rahu in the 12th house usually. And I've had some of my own awakening experiences that are really, I think, indicated by my Rahu placement. Rahu amplifies whatever it's touching. So because Neptune and Uranus are there, this kind of gives me some interesting things going on. Neptune is very, dreamy, intuitive, creative, artistic. So that amplifies that energy. And then Uranus is very kind of boundary breaking, pioneering kind of energy, very future focused. And so and kind of otherworldly in a sense, very very unique and different. So I can have some influence from there from being kind of different in that sense. So there's some different interesting energy tied to my Rahu, and I'm still understanding how that works. um but I think Osho had Uranus with Rahu, and so I have that too, and there's kind of like some kind of pioneering energy with that there. So I'm interested to see how that manifests in my life. Rahu is in Sagittarius, so and my K2 is in Gemini. So basically, that axis is talking about me moving more towards my own truth and my own interest in higher knowledge and philosophy. And so when I was younger, I was more towards, more resonating with the Gemini side with my K2, being able to see other people's perspectives and relate to other people in different ways like that. But as I got older, I got more in touch with my own truth. And so I've been developing my own philosophy in terms of like studying higher knowledge in general, taking classes on Vedic astrology, for example, or human design, or doing my master's program as I'm doing currently. All that is pointing to the development of higher knowledge and developing my own truth. And this even like factored in the way I present myself. I used to like match like with the Gemini stuff going on, the K2. I would come to work sometimes. I'd be matching like someone's outfit. Like I'd be wearing the same outfit as somebody else, and that would happen a lot. And it would be different people in the office. I would be matching somebody else each day. It was pretty weird. And I could tell I wasn't so like in touch with my own truth at the time. It was harder to access. But now I've developed my kind of my own, my own way of presenting myself. I've got like these tattoos now, very bold tattoos, and I wear certain colors like black, maroon, and dark blue as kind of my main colors. And so I have more of a developed sense of myself at this point in the way I present myself. And so that's kind of come out in terms of my own process. So now I feel like I'm much more in touch with my own truth. I'm developing my own philosophy, and that's something I want to communicate as a teacher. Is like that's what the Sagittarius energy is, which is ruled by Jupiter. So it's a lot of kind of being a teacher, spiritual teacher, basically, is what the Rahu and Sagittarius represents. So yeah, that's everything in my birth chart. I just want to talk a little about some stuff in my other charts. So actually, real quick, I'll change this one to moon chart. So you can actually look from your chart from the moon's perspective. So it moves the moon into the ascendant, and then you can see where all the things are placed. One interesting thing to look at is the Rahu K2 axis from here, and from here, from the moon's perspective, the Rahu goes into the ninth house from the moon. So that's even more energy, kind of aligned with Sagittarius kind of energy, the higher knowledge, gurus, philosophy, spiritual teaching. And so that's going to be a really big area of my life, especially because sun is there too, because you can look from the sun chart as well. So this is a really strong chart for me as well to look at. But I'm not going to get too much into that. Let's look at my Navamsha real quick. So Navamsha is another main chart that you look at in Vedic astrology. It's kind of like dissecting the main birth chart and seeing what all the placements are there. And it kind of shows like your deeper spiritual purpose, and as well as what your life will be like post marriage, like in later life. And so some things I can see here is my moon moves into Scorpio. So I'm an Aries moon in my birth chart, but my moon is in Scorpio in my Navamsha chart. So I have some Scorpio kind of energy going on with my moon, which deals more with kind of like the underlying energies, the occult, and being more the deeper underlying energy and spiritual connection. My Mercury is still in Pisces, so it's Virgotama. That's what Virgotama means. It's in the same sign. So my Mercury is actually strong, even though Mercury is actually debilitated in Pisces because it's behaving opposite to what Mercury is used to. But because it's Virgotama, it's actually strengthened. So I have a really strong Mercury in Pisces. So my intuitive ability to deal with my intellect is really strong. So another thing that's really big here is I have 3 planets to Aries in the 8th house. So the 8th house is more occult, death, birth, transformation kind of thing. And so transformative experiences are going to be really big for me, having Venus, Sun, and Saturn in the 8th house in my Navamsha. Sun is still in Aries, so that's for Gotama as well. So my Sun is really strong, like I said earlier. But this brings, more transformational energy. And so I've been going through lots of big transformations in my life. And I feel like that's a really strong signature of my life. The K2 Rahu moves into the 4th house. It's for Virgotama also. It's in Sagittarius and K Gemini. So that's another Virgotama placement. So I have a lot of Virgotama planets, which really strengthens my chart a lot. But K2 in the 10th house brings kind of more of a spiritual kind of career, alternative career. And Rahu in the 4th house means I'm moving more towards the home life kind of experience. So that's some things in my Devam show I wanted to point out. And then real quick, I'll talk about my Dasham show, which is the chart that's designated for career. And one thing I just want to point out in here is my 10th house ruler is so my 10th house has Pisces and has K2 there. So again, K2 being there indicates a spiritual career, alternative career. But you can look to see where the ruler of that house is, which is Jupiter, and Jupiter is in Gemini in the ascendant. And so when I had my reading with James Braha, he pointed this out to me, and he said that having the 10th house ruler Jupiter in the first house indicates that I'll use my physical body in my career. And this could be through me being a performer or being a teacher, like being on stage in front of people. So being like, a musician performing on stage, but using my body and my energy as I'm performing, or being a spiritual teacher where I'm using my body's energy in the interaction with my audience. So that's an interesting thing to see. And I've been feeling into me doing that in later in my life, going on tour, playing shows, and doing talks on stage in front of people. So it's really interesting when he said that, because I really resonate with that. So we'll see how it happens, but that's kind of my goals for my life. But yeah, so that's all the stuff that I see in my Vedic chart. And you can see it goes really deep, and there's a lot of different themes going on. But I totally resonate so deeply with everything that's present in my chart. So like I said, I recommend checking out Vedic astrology, learning as much as you can about it, because this is really a fantastic occult system, and it reveals so many patterns and things that are operating in your life. It's really the macrocosm reflects the microcosm. So the state of our solar system and where everything is placed in relation to each other is really highlighting different themes that are happening, and there's a synchronicity that happens with our birth and what's happening in the solar system and the cosmos in general, that's really important to pay attention to. And there's this really good book, Cosmos and Psyche, by Richard Tarnas, that talks about how the main aspects between the planets, the outer planets, really reflect what's going on in the world anytime, and with key people in history and what's been happening. So really interesting book to check out. It really reinvigorated my interest in astrology after taking a break from it, because I can see how these patterns are really playing out. And so, yeah, I really love Vedic astrology, and I'd recommend anybody who's interested in astrology to really give Vedic astrology your time and attention to really learn as much as you can, because it's such a more advanced system. There's much more going on to check out, and it's going to be different than your Western chart. So yeah, that's it. That's my Vedic astrology charts. Now I'm on to my human design chart. And human design is another system that uses the same information as your astrology, your birth information, and it builds this chart that's a body graph, and it shows your different energy centers and what's operating there, and different channels between different centers, which is a transmission of different energies that are present in your body and your being. And so there's different things that you can learn through looking at your human design body graph. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about those things for what's present in my own chart. So one of the main things that they talk about is what they call type. And my type is the projector, which is one of they're kind of known as kind of like the directors in a way. Like if you're imagining all the types in a like a production of a movie or something, the projector would be more of the director. Or they're really kind of like the guide that sits on the side and helps the generators, which are most of the people. It helps guide them towards what they, seeing them and helping them uh, get to know themselves and direct their energy properly. So it's kind of a weird type to be because there's no defined sacral center. That's one of the key signature things, and there's no connection from a motor. And a motor is like the emotional solar plexus center, the sacral, or the heart, or the root, and there's no connection to the throat. So I don't have the driving energy um, that would make me a manifestor or a manifesting generator or that kind of thing. So it's kind of a weird type to be, but that comes with its own lessons. And some of the main lessons are um, learning how to be recognized and seen. And a lot of projectors struggle with this at first, is that they want to be seen and acknowledged for who they are, and so they're kind of eager to be noticed by people, and so they'll try to establish connections with people that aren't actually right, and they'll try to communicate what they're passionate about or be involved with people and try to be seen. But if they're not, if it's the wrong people, it's going to make them feel bitter because it, they're interacting with the people that aren't actually right for them. So there's a need to like develop and cultivate kind of like a silent uh, and content state of awareness where you're more of a listener and more of an observer. And so you kind of sit back more and let people come to you and recognize you. And so those are the people who really recognize you and reach out to you, ask you questions, want to engage with you, and invite you into things are the ones that actually recognize you for who you are. And it's really important to pay attention to that when people really do see you, because those are the people that you're supposed to be working with as a projector. Each projector has their own group of people that they're working with, their own group of population that they're supposed to impact and influence and interact with. And so not each projector is made for everybody. So it's important to recognize that it's not that projectors are not supposed to interact with everybody. They have specific people that they're supposed to interact with. And their design, chart looks and where the energy is interacts with people in a certain way. And so each is unique, and there's so many variations in how a projector can be configured. But yeah, that's some information on the projector. It took me a while to realize how to deal with the projector energy and how to be a projector properly. And I used to be so kind of like inviting myself into things and trying to like be seen and instigate things. But I realized I needed to sit back and get more comfortable with my energy, get more grounded, and be more calm and be more of an observer. And then that's when people really recognize me and my energy, because like I start setting out the right vibes, like that people can feel me and who I am in the right way. So that's one of the big lessons for the projectors for sure. If you're a projector, to learn all about that, waiting for the invitation and to be seen and listened to and acknowledged. So yeah, that's my type. And then my profile is the 6-2, which is known as the role model hermit. Line is the role model, and the 2 line is the hermit. And so you can find these based on your sun and earth placements. You see after this period, there's a 6 here. That's like on the personality side, and the design side has the 2. So that makes me a 6-2. Just deals with the placements of where the sun and the earth positions are on your chart. But yeah, so the 6 line, the role model, has this has as a 6 line, you have a deep vision and feeling of purpose for your life, that you're going to play a big role and be a role model for people, and each person who's a 6 line has their own unique way that they're moving throughout the world, and they're going to be examples for people in how to be, like how to just be as a person and function in the world. And so they become an example to people, a role model for people on how to do that. but it's a big process. You have to go through. It's the top line. It's the sixth line is the top line out of all the lines. It's the final line. So they kind of have to experience all the different phases underneath that in a certain sense. But one of the things that they say that's really important is that the sixth line experiences being a 3 line for their first 30 years of their life. And the third line is the trial and error one. So it's also known as the martyr. They go through a lot of experiences that don't work, like things don't work out, and they try things out, and things just don't work. And so the first 30 years, a sixth line is trying things out, trying to do their purpose, trying to fulfill their vision, but things just aren't aligned properly, and things just are not working out as well as they hoped. But in that process, they're learning a lot, and once they get to age 30, they take a break from the intensity of life, and they go on the roof, is what they call it, going on the roof. And this is the time when they get to heal from all their attempts in life and all the things they've been trying out, and then their trial and error period, and get to reflect and sit back and heal from all that, but also start to really engage with life in the way that is actually in line with them. But it's more of a reflective kind of sit back kind of energy overall. And then once you get to age 50, that's when the role model sixth line comes out onto center stage, representing everything they've learned in their 50 years of living, and they get to really function as the role model. So that's all about the sixth line. They have an innate talent in certain areas, and what they need to do is they need to have their hermitage, so their time alone, to really to build up and focus on their talents and reflect on things, and they need that space to cultivate their creative energy. And then people will bring them out into the world to engage with their talents and provide those to the world. So that's a part of the 6-2 that and the way they operate is they have some innate talent that they provide while they're being a sixth line, while they're developing their role model ability. So that's everything about the 6-2. Now I'll talk about the incarnation cross that I have, and it's the left angle cross of limitation. So everybody has a cross in their chart, and the cross is it's basically based on your sun and earth placements and your personality and the design side. They're the most key placements that you have. So for me, what the cross of limitation means is learning how to accept limitations as a empowering aspect. So basically, it's like learning how to deal with structure, taking on structures when needed, so that you can achieve things. And so basically, to achieve anything, we need to take on certain structures and limitations, so that we can work with those limitations to really produce things, create things, and really grow ourselves and develop our lives, and to find material success in general in the end, because you need to have these limitations in place to deal with that. So that's basically what I'm learning about. And I was saying this earlier in the other parts of these different systems I've been talking about. A theme that's been operating for me is learning about limitations and taking on structures to really move my life in a certain direction. And so that's kind of a lesson that I would be playing as having a cross of limitation in my body graph in my human design. So that's my human design chart. And that's everything in my whole presentation. So let's go back here to review everything. So like I said, I'm an INFP in my Myers-Briggs, Enneagram 459, Michael Teachings, a mature scholar in dominance. Vedic Astrology is I'm a Capricorn rising, Aries moon, and Aries sun. and my human design is 6'2" projector crossover limitation. So what I can say overall for me is like there's a lot of themes of creativity, being focused on my inner world, being somebody who studies and provides knowledge, seeks knowledge, and provides knowledge. Leadership themes are really big for me. Dealing with my creativity, like I said, it's going to be really huge. Being a role model, dealing with structure, uh, embracing structure to help me move forward with things, and being like a kind of a spiritual teacher in a certain way. Those are all themes that I can see throughout all these different systems for me. So really, all of it does resonate really deeply with me and my own experience, and I've used these tools to help me a lot in my life. And so that's why I want to, teach about all these different systems. And so, I just wanted to make this video so everybody gets to see what my own stuff is, and to potentially learn something about themselves if you resonate with any of this stuff, like the Myers-Briggs Enneagram, or have any similar placements in your other charts to what I have, such as being a projector or a scholar or having an Aries moon or whatever it is. But yeah, that's me overall for all the different systems. My plan is to be able to make these profiles for other people so that they can learn about themselves and have like a whole body of work that they can read through and learn about themselves. And so that's kind of my whole drive for all this stuff. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in and watching all this. If you stayed through the whole thing, if you like this content, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.